Hare Krishna. Yes, Sumit is joining now. Just to give us 1 second, he'll be with you shortly. Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Hare Bol, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Panch Kumar Govind Prabhu. Namo Vishnu Padhaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadeeshadarini Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Shri Radhe. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki Jai. Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki Jai. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, to stop or temporarily suspend our Bhagavad Gita series, and this time we're doing a one-off entire Bhagavad Gita summary, because, as we know, Gita Jayanti is happening in only 5 days from now, on Christmas Day this year. So we're going to do an entire summary of the Bhagavad Gita. And we'll carry on with the 7th chapter next month, but we'll now take a D route temporarily just to focus on the entirety of the Bhagavad Gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayamudhirayet.
Tato Jayamudhirayet.
So, Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita. What is Bhagavad Gita? Well, before we start off, we'll have a little brief introduction. Bhagavad Gita is literally the song of God. And it's narrated by, it's a conversation between Arjun and Lord Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And of course, all of the Bhagavad Gita occurs in this ancient epic of the Mahabharata, which is a long family history, which culminates in a war, and this terrific war, which causes extreme calamity and death between these two opposing parties. In this story, we have a small section which is taken out, which is the dialogue between Arjuna and Lord Krishna. And this is the Bhagavad Gita. This is what we describe as the Bhagavad Gita. So, of course, previously, all these literatures, they were not written down, but they were transmitted via oral reception, speaking and hearing. So because our memories do not have this capacity today, but they used to remember what they heard, and they would repeat it as they heard it. And so that's how it was passed by word of mouth. But Vyasadeva, recognizing our fallen age of Kali and our fallen state in this age of Kali, he decided to document everything. So, well, he decided to document with the help of a writer, of course, being Ganesh. And he began to he wrote down all of these, or he got transcribed all of these Vedic literature, including the Mahabharata, of which Bhagavad Gita is a part of. And otherwise, without Vyasadev's not translation, but writing, we would not be able to access this Bhagavad Gita. And there's this wonderful analogy given by Shankaracharya about the Bhagavad Gita. So it goes, Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dhogda Gopala Nandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat. Sarvo Panishado Gavo, all the Upanishads, they are compared to a cow. Dogda Gopala Nandana, this cow, this Vedic knowledge, which is now in the form of a cow, it's being milked. And who's it being milked by? Gopala Nandana. It's being milked by Lord Krishna. Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta. Partha, Arjun, is the calf. And he's drinking this milk. And not only him, but who else is drinking the milk that was left over? Sudhir Bhokta. The wise, they're also drinking this milk. And what is this milk? Dugdam Gitamritam Mahed. This milk is the nectar of the Bhagavad Gita. So this analogy is given that all this Vedic literature is in the form of a cow, and the essence of that milk is the Bhagavad Gita. And this is one of the glories of the Bhagavad Gita, that it's the essence of the Vedic literature, and it provides the jewels of Vedic literature, and it's the summary in that sense. So, a brief history about the Bhagavad Gita. It's originally, actually, although the one that we talk about is between Arjuna and Lord Krishna, this knowledge has existed from time immemorial. In fact, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna that, actually, I've told this science before to Surya Bhagavan, the sun god. I've told this 120 million years ago. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavanaham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manurikshvakave pravit. That he says, I've told Vivasvan. I've already told this to Vivasvan, and he told it to his son, but somehow or other, as they were telling this has been lost. And so I'm telling you again. And so although he told the same science of self-realization of Bhagavad Gita to the sun god 120 million years prior to telling Arjuna again at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And this brings out one of the important points, which is that the spiritual knowledge is eternal and unchanging. Whereas because of the nature of material knowledge, it's acquired through our own senses and perception and understanding, it's ever changing. As we get better, as our technology get better, as more assumptions and more hypotheses are tested, we then make new and new ideas. You can see this in any scientific example, because that is the nature of science. That's how science works, and that's how the material knowledge works. And that's the nature of material knowledge. We can't go and disagree with it. That's just the nature of it. But spiritual knowledge, such as this Bhagavad Gita, stays there from time immemorial, and it's unchanging, and it always applies. Whereas our own perceptions and our understandings depend on the equipment and the facilities we have around us, this Bhagavad Gita does not change. Whether you apply it today, 5,000 years ago, or in another 5 million years to come, it will still work, because that is the nature of this Bhagavad Gita. It's unchanged, it's eternal. And so why did Lord Krishna speak this to Arjuna? He could have chosen to speak this to anyone. So actually, Lord Krishna speaking it to Arjuna, by Arjuna asking, we are able to relish this Bhagavad Gita. And Lord Krishna spoke to Arjuna because Arjuna is a friend, and more importantly, Arjuna is devotee. Because those who are devotees are able to understand this Gita. This Bhagavad Gita is able to be understood through and by means of the devotees as well. So for example, we are very grateful to Srila Prabhupada, who has translated this Bhagavad Gita. For some Sanskrit, if there was Sanskrit verses without the translations and the purports, it would become much more difficult to understand this Bhagavad Gita. But because Srila Prabhupada has gone out of his way and kindly translated all these books, we are able to understand. And so we are very grateful to the devotees for making this vast essence of Vedic literature much more bite-sized and digestible for us. And so without further ado, we'll get into some of the main ideas and topics that are covered in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. So the first thing which happens is of course, they're at this battlefield, and Arjun, he says, "My dear Lord, just take me into the middle. Let me see who's on the other side." And after looking at and observing the other army, Arjun has what we can only describe as a breakdown. He becomes anxious, he becomes worried, and he loses his composure. He describes that my hairs are on end, my mouth is dry, my skin is burning, and the Gandiva bow is slipping from my hand. And so he sits down in his chariot and he says, "Oh, I don't know what to do." And it's at this point that Lord Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita to Arjun. And so just in the same way that the problem Arjun had was overcome by the Bhagavad Gita, if we understand and apply it in our lives, we will also be able to overcome it. And that's probably the most important point that we have to keep in mind during the whole of this understanding. If you just go and read books about how to get stronger at the gym, and you read a book and you read another book and another book, but you don't actually go to the gym, then what's the use of it? In the same way, unless this knowledge is applied, then we won't be able to see the results. Simply by having the knowledge without the application, there won't be any result. And so the first topic the first theme and idea, which is pivotal and fundamental in the Bhagavad Gita, is mentioned in the second chapter, the idea of identity. Who am I? Who are we? What is my purpose? Who am I? And this is described that Lord Krishna, he's describing that we are all eternal fragmental parts, the spirit soul. We are not this temporary body which is born and dies again. We are something much more fundamental than that, something eternal, ever existing and primeval. This soul is the driving force behind life. Wherever we see life, we can see that there is a soul there. Because without life, without the soul, there is no life, there is no consciousness. This also then is really useful later on when we understand that we're not this, because we understand that we're not the body, we can also prioritize what's important, what's not important. And we can then say a lot of these problems now that come, most of the problems, when we understand not just hearing and saying, oh, we're not the body, we're the soul, but when we fully understand and agree with that principle, then it makes our life so much easier. Because then all these problems associated with body image or insecurities, they disappear. Any issues we have, they also disappear, because we are not the body, we are the soul. And that is the most fundamental part, which is explained. And we understand that actually, if we are not material, we are not a material body, we are not this material body, then what are we? We're spiritual, we're a spiritual entity. The soul, which is the driving force behind this body. No matter what species of life, whether that be animal, human, or plant, wherever there is life, there is a soul. Because matter comes from matter and life comes from life. That is the fundamental point which is made right at the start of the Gita, that we are not this body, but we are the soul. And when we understand this identity, it teaches us a lot about our identity. And when we understand this, it becomes much easier for us. And so the first thing that the Gita establishes is this matter of who am I? We are the soul. Now, we understand who I am, but what is my purpose? And that's what's delved into more later. So we deal with the self-realization, but the second component of understanding, well, what is my purpose, comes with the next part of the Gita. The first principle that Gita teaches us is who we are, the eternal fragmental part of the spirit soul, which is driving the life force of this body. The spirit soul does not die when the body dies. Instead, it moves on to another body, whereas this body changes and ages and deteriorates over time. The second component is not self-realization, but God-realization. First, we must become self-realized. We should realize that happiness is on our own terms. We should not rely on some other source outside, where some material thing which is temporary, but rather we should keep the happiness on our own terms. And how can we do that? Through the next bit, which is God realization. Who is God? Who is Krishna? What is his nature? Why is he relevant? Why does it matter? So God realization, Lord Krishna establishes himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is an established fact. When one understands the Bhagavad Gita and they don't understand it through a right manner or right medium, they learn it from someone else. They learn it from someone who is simply doing it for the sake of maybe earning money. You know, I'll put on some Gita show and then people will pay me, or they're doing it for some other reason, then we won't be able to understand this. But this is a fundamental point. Like Lord Krishna, matta parataram nanyat. Lord Krishna says in the 7th chapter that there is no truth superior to me. There is no truth superior to me. That's what Lord Krishna states. That Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, sometimes we might find it easy to realize that I'm the soul and I'm not the body. But this knowledge of Krishna consciousness and understanding who the Lord is, that can only come via the Lord's mercy. And that's why we need to listen to the devotees to truly understand this. With a humble state of mind, we should approach the devotee and understand this knowledge. And so God realization of Lord Krishna as the supreme truth. He is Lord Krishna himself, Swayam Bhagavan. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. It's in the Bhagavatam that Lord Krishna is the original source of all other incarnations. Lord Krishna is the origin. He is the most supreme. Krishna, his form, is full of eternal knowledge and bliss. This is Lord Krishna. Beauty, knowledge, and bliss. And so this is the point which is established by the Gita. That again, Lord Krishna says in 10:8, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. That I'm the source of everything material and spiritual. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this worship me from the core of their heart. Krishna establishes his supreme position in this way as well. And when we understand that Krishna is supreme, well, okay, he's saying it. So is there anyone else to confirm it? Then Arjun confirms this as well. And that he says that Param Brahma Param Dhanam. So he says that actually you are the supreme. And not only are you the supreme, but he confirms that also other great living entities have said this. Other sages like Devala, Asita, Narada, all these other Vyasadeva, all these other great sages, they also confirm this statement that Lord Krishna is the supreme person. Lord Krishna is the most supreme. Lord Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. He is Bhagavan. This is established by Bhagavad Gita. When one reads Bhagavad Gita, then this is the conclusion that one must come to. And not only that, Lord, then he also shows his universal form in the 11th chapter. He shows his universal form to Arjuna with many eyes, many heads, many bellies and bodies, and it's just immense, and it keeps on going forever and ever. And actually Arjuna becomes scared after seeing that. But Lord Krishna, he establishes that he is the most supreme through the universal form. And in the universal form, Arjuna could see everything, because Lord Krishna is the source of everything as well. And so we must come to the same conclusion through our realization of the Bhagavad Gita, through our understanding that Lord Krishna is confirmed that he states, and then Arjuna confirms, and many of the great living entities confirm, and he even shows his Vishvarup, the universal form. And why does Lord Krishna show the universal form? Well, firstly, it establishes the fact that Lord Krishna is Lord, is the supreme. And it also establishes that if anyone else is the Lord or the supreme, then they must also prove that by showing the universal form. Anyone else who claims to be God must also show universal form. So, firstly, we have understood our own position as the self, the fragmented part, the eternal fragmental part of life or consciousness, as the soul, which is driving the matter, driving the body. And then we also understand God consciousness. So self-realization and God realization. These are two fundamental aspects of the Bhagavad Gita. And then we can understand a little bit about, this is important, but now let's understand and apply it and utilize it. So living in this material world. So this material world is described in the 8th chapter, verse 15. Dukkhalayam, it's a place full of misery, and ashashvatam, it's temporary. It's not permanent, it's non-permanent. So firstly, the nature of this material world, dukkhalayam, it's a place full of misery, and it's also temporary. This is the material world we live in. Now, one who has come to this knowledge and understanding, now in a place which is described, it's labeled, if someone tells you that, right, this world is made, it's full of misery and it's temporary. Now, someone, after understanding that, they won't focus and try to gain their happiness from this material world. They won't keep the material world as their source of happiness. Instead, you realize that actually this is not the nature of this world, because it's temporary and it's a place full of misery. Dukkhalayam. It's a place full of misery. That is a very important point to understand. This is the material world which we are living in. And Lord Krishna then says in the second chapter very nicely, Matra sparshastu kaunteya sitoshna sukha dukkada agama payino nityastam stitikshasva bharata. The happiness and distress are like the summer and winter seasons. They come and go. And we must learn to tolerate these. We must learn to become equipoise and tolerant to these. That is the nature of the material world. It's not that when you become Krishna conscious, all these material miseries disappear. They don't disappear. They exist, but we don't become affected by them. The nature of this world is there are dualities. There are ups and there are downs. There are ups and downs. We can experience this through our own lives. You'll be able to tell. There are periods which are much happier. I mean, I'm very young, so those of you who are older will be more experienced and have more understanding of this. That there's periods where you're happier, and there's periods where it's more stressful, more miserable. And then again, there'll be periods when it's happier. It's a duality. Like when you get these, I always forget the name of this. You get these tape recordings. You have a side A and a side B. When you get the side A, you get the side B alongside the side A. You can't get it separately. That is the nature of the material world. These both come in dualities. And so the way we can understand how can we overcome the dualities of material nature is through self-realization and God realization. Lord Krishna then establishes very nicely in the first third chapter to sixth chapter, the idea that we should work. We should work for the pleasure of God. And otherwise we'll have a reaction for our work. Every work we do has a reaction, whether it be a good reaction with a pious effect or a bad reaction with a negative effect, where we are punished for sinful activity. But beyond that, there is also an inaction, action which produces no effect. And that happens when we perform our activity, we do our work, but for the service of the Lord. So, for example, the example is given in the 5th chapter, the Padma Patramivambasa. So when one works, but for the sake of the Lord, it's like a lotus leaf which is surrounded by the water, but it's not touched by the water. Actually, the covering on the lotus leaf is now used as a water repellent in many items, because that's the nature of the lotus leaf. Although it's surrounded by the water, it's not affected by the water. When a drop of water, if you put on a lotus leaf, you'll see how it sort of bubbles up into a balls up, and it just rolls off the edge of the leaf. The leaf is completely unaffected, although surrounded by the water. And so similarly, if we do our work, which is going to have ups and it's going to have downs, that's the nature of this work, but we do it for the service of the Lord, then firstly, we won't be affected by the ups and downs, and we also won't be affected because we won't have there will be no action, which comes, material reaction, which comes from this work. Because material actions and reactions, they bind us, because that is the nature of the material world. It's binding us. But when we perform this inaction, where we work for the service of the Lord, then we are able to not be affected by material nature. We are able to go past and break those bonds. And this is one of the most important ideas, that we work. We don't give up the work. We work. And we don't attach ourselves to the fruits of these works. Instead, we work for the pleasure of the Lord. That's simply it. The summary of those first 6 chapters is very simple. It's that we work for the pleasure of the Lord. And this idea of working for Krishna, doing our duty. When Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, he doesn't say, you know what, you're right. Maybe you should give up, go to the forest, go to Himalayas and meditate. He doesn't say like that at all, because that's not dharma. That's not the right thing to do. The right thing is do your duty, but do it with the right attitude, with the right consciousness, with the right mindset. And we can see so many times in examples. Okay, Arjuna example 5,000 years ago. Again, the story of Janak Maharaj is often given. Janak Maharaj, he's a king. Because he's a king, he's got to indulge in material affairs. He's got to indulge in worldly affairs. He's got to keep up with the things around him. But yet, there's actually a story that a group of sages, they come to him and say, how is it that although you're surrounded by all these material things, you're not affected by them? And so he says, come to lunch tomorrow. And so they come the next day, and he pulls out an 18, 19 course meal with all sorts of delicacies and items, which are wonderfully prepared. And then he says, so please take a seat and please eat. But there's a sword which is hanging above you, and it's attached to the ceiling with a small short string. So now keep that in mind and eat. So they all eat very quickly, of course, because they're looking at the sword above them. And so he says, so how did your meal go? Did you really enjoy it? And they say, it was very nice, but we were unable to really focus on it. Instead, we were thinking about the sword which is hanging above us. And that's exactly what it is. That's what Janak Maharaj says. That's exactly what it's like. When one engages the consciousness in thinking about Lord Krishna, then whatever work one does, one's not affected by that work. This is a really good example to understand. When that knife is hanging above you, you can't think about the food that you're eating, no matter how tasty that gulab jamun or samosa might be. We won't be able to focus on it. Instead, we'll only be able to think about that knife. So similarly, if we're only thinking about the Lord, doesn't matter whatever material work happens, we're not affected by those actions. And so, again, it's not doing the wrong work, doing the right work, doing your duty, but doing it for the Lord's pleasure, doing it with the Lord in mind for the Lord's pleasure. Then we'll be able to tolerate the ups and downs that material life throws at us. And then, okay, so these two examples are from a long time ago. Someone might say, well, I don't know if Arjun's real. I don't know if Janak Maharaj, I don't know if that story I want to believe. Firstly, they are fact, but then in the modern day, examples we have Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a very great preacher and he's a very great devotee of the Lord. And he was a magistrate actually, not too long ago, 1890s, 1880s-ish, where he did a lot of his work and books and writings of bhajans and literature, and he made it very understandable, the science of Krishna consciousness. And he was a magistrate. In fact, there's a story that they built a railway just for him to come to work, because he thought, you know what, no, I'm not going to do work now. I'm feeling a little bit ill or something like that, and it's too long away, it's too long to commute. So they built the railway just for him. The railway's built there just for him to go to work. That's how efficient he was. And then you can check all the records and everything as magistrate, and how effectively he dealt with all the problems and all of these things. But he was in society, very well appreciated and very highly looked upon, even in society. But yet he was a great devotee of the Lord. So it's not the idea that one has to go into some cave in the Himalayas and does meditation and practice. That's not the only way of performing devotion. That's not even the way that's prescribed because of how difficult it is. Instead, one works with the devotional service to the Lord. This is a really, really important point. And so then we will be able to deal with the ups and downs. And even more recent than that, of course, we have Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was a pharmacist. He was a pharmacist, and he's grihastha as well, and he had many children, and yet he engaged in the service of the Lord as well. And even in the present day, we can see so many people now presently in ISKCON they're all married, they're all working, they're all doing their jobs, but still they're serving the Lord. So this is what we mean by living in the material world. We live in the material world, but if you practice the Krishna consciousness, then you won't be touched by material nature, as in the sense that you won't be affected by the things around you. And so this is why one has to work for the service of the Lord. That is the most important point. So self-realization, God-realization, and living in the material world by working for the pleasure of the Lord. And even so I've covered all the Arjun, Janak Maharaj, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada. So these are examples. And this all can be summarized in this one wonderful sentence. Don't give up material work, give up the material mentality. Don't give up the material work, give up the material mentality. Giving up the material mentality, not the work. Material work carries on. But the mentality of greed, the mentality of I'm doing this for me, or I am doing it, this material mentality should be given up. And this is the Maya, which the material nature, and it has this influence, which is that we think firstly, I I'm doing everything. I'm the cause of everything I do. And we want to enjoy materially with all this material prosperity. I'm studying economics. And the basic principle of economics is that by accumulating wealth, one becomes happy. That's one of the most basic ideas, that becoming more wealthy, having more money, having more assets makes you more happy. Of course, that is heavily contested and is completely, from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, that's not the right thing at all. Because how does one become truly happy? When one is happy through devotional service to the Lord. Because this material world doesn't provide you with happiness because it's temporary. Dukkha lema shashvatam. And then, now we've already quoted this. Mamupetya punarjanma dukkha lema shashvatam. Napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gata. That there is, other than this material world, now Bhagavad Gita has acted like a mirror. It's told us who we are, and it will also act as a map. It tells us the destination. There is a material world, it's full of misery. And then when we understand this knowledge, and we realize that we can't get the happiness in misery, because happiness is only temporary and fleeting here, then we're going to look for happiness in no matter which planet. Sorry, that's also another important point to mention. You're on the earthly planet or you're in the heavenly planets as well, enjoying with all the people there. That's not going to provide us with the real happiness. In the material world, it's impossible to get real happiness. And so therefore, we need to tap in to the right connection, which is the spiritual world. We need to tune into that right radio, which is that of Krishna consciousness. And that is going to help us achieve our destination, which is the spiritual world. And the material world, of course, being a place of misery and unhappiness, whereas the spiritual world is the contrary. It's a place full of happiness and bliss. And it's the place of the Supreme Lord's abode, Lord Krishna. This is the destination which is mentioned through Bhagavad Gita. And so we understand the material world. Our peace will only come from spiritual life. We are spiritual entities. We are not material entities. Although we might be materially bound, we're only bound materially. We are not material. We are still spiritual entities, and we need to do these spiritual activities to reclaim and understand our happiness again, and understand our position with the Lord. And that comes through devotional service. So the idea, again, working with devotional service, how can we give up that mentality? That is only done through devotional service as well. Devotional service is like a catalyst that helps speed up that understanding and helps us connect deeper with the Lord. And so then how do we get to that destination? A map doesn't just tell you your destination. It tells you how to get there. If Google Maps just told you how far your destination was, what would be the point? It also tells you how you're meant to get there. So how are we meant to get there? Lord Krishna then says very nicely, this is at the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papevyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. Give up all kinds of religion. He says sarva dharman parityaja, not adharman parityaja. Dharma is like a duty, good duty which you should do. Adharma is things that you should not do, the bad activity, bad duty. And then there is paradharma, that which goes beyond dharma, and that is devotional service to the Lord. And so there is the dharma, and Lord Krishna is saying, no, not even giving up irreligion, giving up all kinds of religion. Give up all kinds of varieties of religion and surrender unto me. This is the ultimate principle of the Bhagavad Gita. Obviously, Lord Krishna could have said this in the first chapter itself, but we wouldn't be able to understand. That's why this whole process has gone through understanding the different pathways to the Supreme, understanding different processes, applications, methods, understanding about the material world, self-realization and God realization, and then we will be able to come to this conclusion that Lord Krishna says, surrender unto me. Mokshayishyami ma shucha. Do not worry, I will deliver you. And how can we understand that? Give up all kinds of religion. Well, from the scriptures, we can see example of Prahlad Maharaj. Now, his not religion exactly, but his duty, dharma, so his dharma is, as a son, to respect, obey, and in a sense, worship with that attitude to the Father. He should that sort of mentality with reverence, with gratitude, with respect, worshipping. That's what he should do, no matter what the Father is like. His duty as a son is to respect the Father. And yet Prahlad Maharaj left that dharma. And instead he focused even beyond that. He went beyond that and surrendered unto the Lord. And therefore he's now he's a great devotee of the Lord, and we can learn so much from his example. And so this is one example from the scriptures where we can see that the religion is given up, the idea of the religion or the duty which is given up to serve the Lord. Again, we can see from Ramayana the example of Vibhishan. And so Vibhishan, as a younger brother, his dharma is to respect, obey, and follow the orders of the elder brother, Ravan. And yet he leaves Ravan and joins the side of Lord Ram. And this is an example again. So he's, of course, in this scenario, this is because they're both demoniac. So that's the point. Of course, don't say now that, oh, Sumit said that you can just disrespect the father and worship Krishna, that's okay, or you disrespect your siblings. That's not the principle. But the principle is that you may give up all kinds of religious activity. It doesn't matter. The ultimate religious principle, the ultimate principle of Krishna consciousness, surrender unto the Lord. Mam ekam sharanam vraja. Mam ekam, Lord Krishna is saying. Me only. Only me. Mam ekam sharanam vraja. Say, surrender unto me. And this is the most important point. That when one gives up, because even in Krishna consciousness, this is not sentimental. This is not a sentimental path. Because it deals with only serving the Lord. So, the principle that we learn from the Bhagavad Gita is Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. And why? And then he says, Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. That I will deliver you from all kind of sinful reaction. Do not worry. This is the principle that Lord Krishna teaches. And how can we understand? Okay, so surrender unto the Lord. What is the method and manner of surrendering unto the Lord? This we can find in the ending of the 9th chapter, where it said, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame veshyasi yuktaivam atmana matparayana. By offering obeisances unto the Lord, by focusing the mind on the Lord, Manmana bhava becoming the Lord's devotee, becoming the servant of the Lord. So engaging ourselves in this devotional service through that manner. And this is how we come to the conclusion of surrendering unto the Lord. And finally, as mentioned earlier, the only way Bhagavad Gita can be understood is through its application. Actually, Lord Krishna says this, and now you might think he's the Supreme Lord, so he's going to be God-fearing. He's going to be scary, and he's going to tell Arjuna, now I've told you, if you don't listen, you'll go to hell. He doesn't say like that. What does he say? Yate chasi tata kuru. I've now told you what I think is right and wrong. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. It's up to us to make that decision of what we need to do in our lives. So how can we surrender unto the Lord? That's up to us. Lord has told that this method works. We have seen this method works amongst time, since time immemorial, amongst every single type of person. This method works. The application of Bhagavad Gita. In fact, let's go back to Arjun. Arjun, when he hears the whole Bhagavad Gita, and he says that Nashto moha smritir labdva, that my illusion is gone and it's been destroyed, and I now know what I'm going to do. Nashto moha smritir labdva tat prasadat maya achyuta stitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. I will do what you have told me. And he's able to overcome his problem, and he's able to fight in that war. Later on again, we are told in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when Arjun, he hears about the departure of the Lord from this planet, he becomes very morose, very anxious. And then again, in that time of difficulty, he then remembers what the Lord has instructed him in the Bhagavad Gita. He then remembers the teachings of the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita. And then he's able to come back, to composure. And he's able to become equipoised again. So that's the example from that time. And now again, in our present day, of course, we can see that so many people, Srila Prabhupada, when he comes to America in the 60s is the time of counter-revolution. Go against everything anyone has said. No matter what anyone has said, what the parents have said, it doesn't matter. We're going to go against it. We're going to do drugs. We're going to do this and that. In a time of counterculture, Srila Prabhupada goes. He doesn't go with the whole plan and scheme of how he's going to entice all the youth. Instead, he goes simply with some Bhagavatam books and this nice bongo drum. And he's just playing in the Tompkins Square Park. All he does, he plays and he chants these holy names of the Lord. What does he do? He preaches. He cooks himself the prasadam. And he preaches this knowledge of Krishna consciousness. There was no active force. There was no force that you need to do this. That was it. Lord Krishna, Srila Prabhupada just came and he spoke the message of Lord Krishna in America. And we can see how in 50 years on since then, how ISKCON has developed today. All those people who were taking drugs and doing the worst of activities, they were able to change their habits and come to the Lord and become engaged in the Lord's service and completely transform themselves as a person.
Government has failed to transform these people.
Uh-huh.
The government has failed.
Yes, sorry, that's a really good point. The American government had actually several schemes which were focused on how to transform this youth, how to get the youth more involved and coming a little bit normal and making society a little bit more stable. And government was struggling. Government couldn't do it, the American government. But Srila Prabhupada did single-handedly. He single-handedly transformed the world. And this is the nature of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness works if applied. Arjun, he says, he has a little rant about his problem. And then he says in second chapter, Karpanya doshapata svabhava. I'm now becoming your Shishyasteham Shadimam Tvam Prapandam. I'm now becoming your disciple and please instruct me. And then after understanding this Gita and then realizing how to apply it, he says that now my doubt and illusion is destroyed in 1873. He says that he's now completely understood what he's going to do. And so if we apply the Bhagavad Gita in our life, it is proven, evidence-based, that we can see that the Bhagavad Gita works. It works time and time and time again. No matter whatever difficulty one is in, if one applies the principles they have understood from the Gita, then they will be able to live in this material world without undergoing and becoming subject to the difficulty. Although the difficulty might be happening, they won't be affected by it. Although the difficulties may come and go, they're not affected because they have realized and understood this knowledge of the Gita. And this knowledge has been existing since time immemorial. It's still there present for us today. If someone comes to you and says, I've got a gift. I'm going to give you a gift. This gift means that you're going to have no more misery, no more trouble, no more problems. Would you say no? No, of course you'd say yes. Please give me that gift. And this is the gift of the Bhagavad Gita. This Bhagavad Gita can act as a panacea. What's the panacea? Is a cure for all. So those who are in pharmacology will know. Well, I know because my dad's always talking about panacea. Panacea, it's a cure for all. It acts as a cure. Whatever misery, whatever problem, whatever difficulty one has, because it tackles from all angles, it's not just going to solve one problem, but any problem that comes materially or spiritually, Bhagavad Gita is able to solve. This is like a jewel. It's like a gem. If you look in the whole Mahabharata, this Bhagavad Gita is like a gemstone. It's so valuable. And not only that, we've only been able to cover the surface level of understanding in the Bhagavad Gita. But if we go and dig deeper and we go and read amongst devotees and we take the association of devotees and try and understand more through the devotees, then we will be able to even go further into the Gita. What to speak? There are 700 verses. And we've only done in 48 odd minutes, and we've been able to cover. But if you go, you can spend hours and hours and hours on just one individual verse. This is the beauty of the Gita, which is actually unlike, for example, unlike Percy Jackson. I don't know if Percy Jackson, anyone will know in the audience, but Percy Jackson's a storybook that was very common when I was in year 5 to 6. You read Percy Jackson, and then you got the books, you read them, and then you go and read through them again, and it's not the same because you already know what's happening. You get bored the second time of reading it automatically. Whereas with Bhagavad Gita, you read it once, you only understand the surface level maybe, and then you read again and you go even deeper. And you read again, it keeps on giving. The Bhagavad Gita never fails us. The Bhagavad Gita is so effective that the first time you understand it, you say, wow. And then the 13th time you understand it, you still go, wow. It's amazing because it keeps on providing us with this knowledge. This knowledge is spoken by the Lord himself. There are different types of Vedic literature. One section is that which is spoken by the devotees to the Lord, which glorifies the Lord. but this Bhagavad Gita is directly Vishnor Vaktrad. It's from the mouth of the Lord. And it's so effective, so useful. It's very easy to apply and understand, no matter what the case, what the scenario. So therefore, now as Lord Krishna says, Yate chasi tata kuru. It's up to us what we want to do. What is the best way and the most practical way of applying this Bhagavad Gita in our lives? It comes down all the time to A, B, C, D. A, association of devotees, whether it be in physical, which is much more difficult, of course, now to COVID, but whether it be in physical association of devotees, or again, associating through Prabhupada, through the books, reading the books with the devotees, you'll be able to engage and understand so much more when we talk amongst the devotees, and understanding from the pure devotees as well. Association with devotees in kirtan. Yes, it's great. You can do kirtan on your own at home. Sometimes I'll pick up the piano, I'll start playing some notes and start singing. But in the group of devotees together, when you start singing and dancing, the atmosphere is unparalleled. The association of devotees in the kirtan, the association eating prasadam amongst devotees is also very enjoyable. So associating with devotees while performing Krishna conscious activity. Not only that, they'll be able to guide us. If we have an issue, then we can say, okay, I'm going through this difficulty, please help me. So association of devotees is paramount, because whenever we go astray from the path, it will come and fix us back on the path. Now B, A, association, B, books. Reading these books from Srila Prabhupada. For example, the Bhagavad Gita in itself has so much knowledge, understanding, and realization that you can dedicate not one day, not 1 year, but even if you dedicate your whole life to the Bhagavad Gita, we still won't be able to understand and squeeze out every little bit of the nectar from there. These books which have been given to us by Srila Prabhupada, who has spent hours and hours and hours translating and going through and writing these purports so that we can understand. We'd read these books, then we'll be able to come and understand what is Krishna consciousness. Now C, the principle of Kali Yuga, Yuga Dharma, the duty of this age, chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This mantra, we can do it as mantra meditation, as japa when we're chanting on our beads. We can do it amongst devotees as a kirtan. But this chanting of the holy names must be there. The chanting of the holy name is paramount because it's the process which is recommended for this age. And it's one of the best ways, especially when at kirtan, you cannot go wrong. By doing chanting and kirtan and reading and association, you can't go wrong. This chanting will also keep us on path. We should chant with the mood, my dear Lord, please engage me in your devotional service. And then finally D, the diet. Diet, not necessarily as in counting the number of calories you're eating and certain food items. That's different. But the diet we're talking about is prasadam. Offering the prasadam, cooking the prasadam. Trust me, it's not the same. When you buy food from outside compared to when you actually cook yourself and offer that food to the Lord, it's so much better. Well, even if you don't want to buy from outside and you cook yourself, then you're able to automatically see over any flaws in the food. So therefore, there's that little psychological effect. But in this one, in prasadam, not only do you cook yourself, you know what you're putting in, you know which vegetables are going in, you know what sabji you're making, you know what rice you're making. That's a little bit of exercise more than a sedentary lifestyle that would have. You know, if you're just sitting down and order Subway, Uber Eats, you know, you won't get that. But if you stand up and do a little bit more activity, you'll be there. But most importantly, when you offer to the Lord with love and devotion, and then the Lord accepts and he infuses that prasadam with the mercy. Prasadam means mercy. Infuses the food with the mercy. And then you can take that and accept that. And that is an amazing, the fact that you can practice devotion while eating is the best thing, the best thing about Krishna consciousness. You can eat anything which Lord wants. You just simply cook, offer and eat. And that in itself is devotional service. That is one of the beauties of Krishna consciousness. And finally, alongside A, B, C, D, there is also understanding and the philosophy. Philosophy is also a really important point. Honoring prasadam amongst devotees is even more enjoyable. Yes, devotee association is definitely, it's a lot more difficult virtually over Zoom and things like that. But hopefully one day we'll be able to see the devotees again. Honoring prasadam amongst devotees is the atmosphere when you finish kirtan, you're in the temple, you finish kirtan, and then you go and you stand in the line. and you got your plate. There's the plate there, and then you go and you take prasadam, and you say, Prabhuji says, do you want some more? And you say no, and Prabhuji puts even more anyway. And you take that, and you go sit down, and you all eat together. That in itself is devotional service. That is allowed, and that is bona fide method of practicing devotion. Eating prasadam. Yeah, I'd agree. Raj Kumar Govinda Prabhu, thank you so much. That is an amazing point. And so, in the understanding of the reading the books, it's that we also have to have the philosophy going on constantly. If we're chanting and we don't have a philosophical understanding, then it might become just repetitive. And if we don't have the association as well, it might just be that we're doing something, we don't know why we're doing it, we just get more doubts, and then we end up doing something nonsense and leaving. But that's why if we have A, B, C, D, then this is the best way of applying that Krishna consciousness in our life. And the principles of the Bhagavad Gita all come down to surrender unto the Lord. No matter what goes on, if we take the shelter of the Lord who's the most merciful, then we will be able to overcome any difficulty and challenge which is put in our path. So with that, that very just general summary of the Bhagavad Gita with the main points, we definitely can't go in and go into depth on the realizations and the sweetness of some of the verses. With that little time which we have, I'd like to say thank you very much to everyone who's been on there. Thank you very much, Raj Kumar Govinda Prabhu and Radha Koli Mataji, Shashi Mataji and Shiva Prabhu and all others who are on this call. Please take up and practice this Bhagavad Gita in your lives. And of course, yeah, Christmas is the season of giving. So if you understand and you feel that, yes, definitely I'm able to tell that it's working, and this process of Krishna consciousness and practicing Bhagavad Gita is working, then feel free to share it with us at the time of Christmas. It would be an amazing gift to give someone a gift which cures all their problems. I think that would be a great idea. Any comments or questions? Thank you very much, Anurada Koli Mataji. We've got one question from the audience, so I'm going to repeat it here.
Just a comment. You mentioned panacea, and I was going to say it's not just panacea, it's a prophylactic as well.
My mom said it's not just a panacea, but it's prophylactic as well. What does prophylactic mean?
It prevents the problem.
Oh, it prevents the problem. Okay.
Like vaccines.
Yes, like a vaccine. It's prophylactic. It cures as well the problem as well
before it comes.
It cures the problem before it can affect again. So that's the nature of Bhagavad Gita.
It prevents the problem coming.
Prevents the problem from coming. Okay, Raj Kumar Govinda Prabhu, Prabhuji, can you kindly say a few words about what should be our attitude when we are honoring prasadam? Well, so when honoring prasadam, the first principle, which I did say diet as a joke, which is that we should not diet, but the principle that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has mentioned quite strongly, and is again also reiterated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, which is that we eat not too much. Yeah, in the nectar of instruction, eating too much or too little. Both of these are not right. And so we should eat as much as necessary. When honoring prasadam, we should discuss topics of the Lord. One of the Prabhujis from London, Krishna Kirtan Prabhu, often mentions that in their programs, some of their programs, what they do actually is after the class, you get the prasadam, you eat, and you sit next to someone you've never met before. And so then you will only focus on Krishna consciousness, because you don't know that person. That only connection you have there is Krishna consciousness. So that is one method of aggressively doing it, forcing it upon yourself. But the idea that when we honor prasadam, we should not be playing around or things like that, because that is the mercy of the Lord. But we should think about the Lord, and we should accept the prasadam with gratitude, and keeping that in mind, that the only reason we are able to enjoy such prasadam instead of having to fast like some people in the Himalayas is because Srila Prabhupada has wonderfully come to the West, and he's given us this wonderful philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So if there's no questions, the next Sunday? It'll be the 3rd of January. We will, in the new year, we'll carry on with the 7th chapter summary, second part of the 7th chapter. Thank you very much, Raj Kumar Govinda Prabhu, and all others on the call. So we'll see you next 3rd of January, next time on 7th chapter, the summary, and prasadam will be served at your own homes. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare